One of our first friends in tea-inspired gastronomy was a young man from Sri Lanka who went all the way to Australia. And my father had to travel to Sydney to catch up with Peter. Peter Kuruvita is a Sri Lankan on loan to Australia. He is tea-inspired, he's a brilliant chef. You've seen My Sri Lanka, and he's right here with us.
How are you,
Peter?
all? Hi, Dilmah. Good
Tell
to
us.
see you.
I love the story of my father coming to your restaurant. Please share it with our audience.
Well, I think it was about 1986, 1985, and I was in the kitchen. My name was on the bottom of the menu, and a waiter came in and said, "There's a very distinguished gentleman out there who'd like to talk to you." So I went out, and Mr. Fernando said, "Kuruvita, are you Sri Lankan?" And we had a conversation, and the conversation went. He said, "I'm here to launch my tea. I'm coming to Australia because I love this country." And he was off to speak to a very famous broadcaster called Alan Jones to start his whole process. And he just said as he left, "I'll keep an eye on you." And so over the years, this happened. And then 2002, you and I met. And that, the rest is, and then you sent me about 32 teas, and off I started on my odyssey of trying to create this incredible product within food as well. It's been an amazing trip, and I hope it continues.
The thing about that, people laugh when Peter tells them that we sent him 32 teas. But the point about it is that gastronomy and food, doesn't it have a beautiful synergy that tea helps the food to bloom and the food brings the tea in such beautiful technicolor?
It does. And, at that stage, so as soon as I received all these teas, I was overwhelmed, but also the green packet had emerged into this beautiful tea series. And it was so colorful and beautiful. And I don't think anyone at that stage had really understood or seen that many variable teas. And that was also the exciting thing. For me, I just kept looking. Every time I smelled one of them, I just thought of food. And that was the beginning of that. We started experimenting, and the first thing I did, got on the net and went tea and food. One or two things came up. That was it, Dilhan. At that stage, there were the marbled eggs, which I presented a few days ago because I wanted to take us back to that history. And then there was lots of tea smoke stuff where they were burning this beautiful herb to try and get smoke out of. So that set the challenge for me to start and continue. And, as a chef, you get excited about ingredients. And every time, if you could smell this room, it would excite you. It is fresh. It's like the tea fields are behind us. And that excites chefs. And so it wasn't that hard to start and continue, and hopefully continue for a lot longer with my odyssey of trying to build flavor through tea. What you said in the beginning, as soon as you smell it, the aroma and the flavors, it's food. It's food.
But also, I think one of the things that some chefs miss, not you, is when you talk about a tea-inspired dish, you need to have some dimension of the tea influencing the dish.
You do.
Tell us.
Well, let's start with the feeling of tea, because if we start with a black tea, when it influences, it has to marry. It has to be, if it overpowers it, nobody's going to like it, because we all know that if you overbrew tea, the astringency is too much. You need to learn, and it took me a long time to get that balance through experimentation. Again, another thing that chefs love to do. So bringing out the flavors and the taste of tea is one thing, but the next part of it is, because you have such a beautiful range of teas, let's take a spiced chai. Think about the ingredients in it. You've got cinnamon, clove, cardamom, ginger. If you blend that and you smell it, you would swear that you were at a spice box. And so it makes it very easy to work with those teas. A little bit harder with the different other teas. I discovered things like chicken. Chicken goes amazingly well with, say, a chamomile, which isn't one of the black teas, but it's a beautiful infusion or a flower. But if we talk about a black tea, to me, Earl Grey. Earl Grey just stands out because the bergamot, we squeeze lemon. Whenever I squeeze lemon or lime or citrus into something, I say that it's adding life. And as soon as I tasted that tea, I thought, wow, this is easy. There are so many dimensions to it. Chocolate goes incredibly well. But then I've infused it with honey and brushed it on bacon. So you need to let your imagination flow, and that is what this tea allows you to. And once you start to flow, I now get sent quite a few from that team over there of requests. You know, can I have a boozy high tea? Can I have a Great Gatsby high tea? Can I have all of these different flavors? It becomes easier and easier the more you practice. The more you practice and the more you understand all the different elements of the tea and the terroir and everything, cooking with tea becomes very simple. Flavors, everything.
Simple, yes, to you. But assume that one of our audience wants to start. Now, tea is volatile. So if you take a Ranvatta, 6,200 feet above sea level, light and delicate, and you cook it on a high flame, or you boil it or whatever, you're going to lose all the characteristics. So tell us some of the methods you use to preserve the taste of tea.
Sometimes, like with a light, beautiful tea like this, I'm looking at this now, that is a roasted chicken consomme, right there. That's a food right there. That looks like a soup to me. And so think about that. A consomme is something that you have to be so delicate with. You set that raft, you let all the flavors boil through. So something like this, if I was to make a chicken consomme, you mince the chicken, you would mix it with your vegetables, then mix the tea through it. And what you do when you're making a consomme, you chill the chicken stock, and then you add the raft. And as it boils, it percolates through that raft. It's brewing tea. And it's going to add color, but it's also going to add a depth. So sometimes with stock and soups, people add additives, add tea. So be careful. Yes, you're right, Dilmah. You've got to be careful. As you move along and you get stronger and stronger, you can get bolder and bolder. This is beef stock. You know, like something like this, which is the highest, it's the yatta, right?
Yatta.
Yeah, so this is strong, bold, robust. It looks like a glass of red wine from here. That can take a little bit more. I tend not to boil, I tend not to heat, I tend to infuse, because then you're taking one element, which is beautiful, say it's a piece of meat or whatever, but you're also taking a second element, which is the tea, and you're infusing them, you're marrying them. You're not trying to force it down each other's throat. You want them to meet in the middle. And when you're tasting food and wine, when you're tasting food and tea, one should give way to the other, and at the end you should have both. And yes, it's a bit difficult, it takes time. I urge you to though. I mean, there's a lot of experiments in one of these tins. You know, like that's 2.5, that's a tablespoonful, right? And it grows to this incredible size. So it's not hard to have a tin and try and practice and think. Like this is a great example. Just think about this. It is so easy to look at that as food. It's a sherry or a port, maybe a Pinot Noir. What would we cook with a Pinot Noir? You know, we might end up with this one saying, okay, I don't want to infuse it, I want to pair it. So then you have two separate things, and it gives you an idea that with a Pinot Noir, we need something a little bit lighter. We wouldn't go a piece of fish because it would be too strong. But if we paired those two together, you end up with a match made in heaven. And it's trial and error, but we like doing that. That's what chefs do.
Peter, we have Camellia Epicurean, because you've been part of them and you've curated so many. Now, sometimes people look at me and wonder if I've drunk too much tea when I tell them you can have an 8-10 course evening with tea, with tea pairing, tea-infused foods. Yes. Tell us a little bit about your perspective on Camellia Epicurean with the benefit of so much experience now.
Well, I think we've been to many countries that don't drink alcohol, so that's a perfect way to start, where you just pair everything with tea. But looking down the range and looking behind us, there are so many different things. You can start with a white tea, which is like a champagne. Maybe you can infuse, maybe make that into a little custard or something like that. So the two tones and that grassy, lemony tone comes through. And then as you go through, it's a matter of, I guess, coming up with first the tea. And even with wine dinners, what I do first is because you have to respect the maker. You have to respect the tea itself. Any chef can go, I want to do these 10 dishes. I don't care what the beverage is. First, taste the beverage. Make sure that you understand the length, the depth, how much you can push into it. And if you come across a tea that is standalone, beautiful, put it aside and pair it. But as they get stronger or different infusions, I mean, there are so many beautiful infusions that talk tea to me or talk food to me all the time. So then it's much easier. And you use it as an ingredient. So Camellia Epicurean, say there's your apple pie and cinnamon. I mean, anyone out there, you look at it, you think about going to the shop and buying a stick of cinnamon. What, not just sweet, but savory items can also be paired with that. So you have the sweetness, you have that beautiful Ceylon cinnamon, and instantly you start thinking. So to make a dinner of 7 or 8 courses that matches, balances, but at the end of it, you end up with the taste of tea, my suggestion is, it's called the KISS. Keep it simple. And then there's another word which I won't say. But keep it simple. Don't try and make the food so elaborate that you can't taste the tea. And vice versa. Don't make the food too simple that the tea overtakes it. So it's about simplicity. It's about a little bit of experimentation. But then when you put it on the plate, make sure that both marry harmoniously. It's great fun.
You'd say I'm biased, but tea-inspired food or menu like the Camellia Epicurean,
Yes.
To me is so much more complex than a whiskey paired or so on, because of course the alcohol and the alcoholic burn influences. But
does.
do you feel that we could have, with the softness, the more sophistication, the subtle sophistication in tea, that we could have tea-inspired dinners that, or lunches or breakfasts or whatever, that could have the same level of sophistication?
Well, alcohol is sophisticated in some people's eyes and other people don't have it. This is universally accepted. So yes, it can be. Sophistication comes, so what would be the earthiest tea that you have? What would be something that has really earthy tones?
A Neelagama, single estate tea, low grown, sandy soils, Indian Ocean air, so really intense, humid.
Truffles, caviar. So that's how high you can go. Because that earthiness, maybe even a barramundi. So what you're trying to do is pay respect to that earthiness, but also match a tea with it, which works really well. So I think with a really earthy, strong tea, something that mushrooms comes to mind. I mean, we haven't practiced any of this. I love it when he throws questions at me, but it inspires me because it continues to make me think about how we can do it. And I asked, what's the earthiest tea? Bang, you can get it. So that's the great thing too. Then you might say, listen, I'm sort of going on a seafood bent and I need something a bit lighter, something that has a little bit more citrus. It's not too strong. Then I'm sure you'll be able to give me another whole lot of suggestions. Like, we're not even talking green tea, we're talking black tea. Once you get into green tea, it's another whole ball game. And so it's probably, from one plant, there's probably more ingredients here than there would be in a vegetable market as far as flavors. All you have to do then is go to the vegetable, fish or meat market and combine them. First, taste the tea. Let that dictate what you're going to do. Never disrespect the hard work of the 2 leaves and a bud, of the way Ceylon tea is processed, and then go and match it with that or infuse it with it. It's so much fun. You can see I get pretty excited.
Afternoon tea is something that we are seeing coming up all around the world. For most people, different countries, you have an afternoon tea that is either the 18th century tradition of scones and not a lot of tea, but in some cases it's about alcohol.
Yeah.
In Sri Lanka, it's a lot about heavy food, which is unrelated to the occasion. Tell us a little bit more about the occasion, the sizing of the food, and also how tea might play a role.
Well, I mean, afternoon tea was, as you've told me many times, it was designed for the bored people who had nothing else to do, and it fitted in between lunch and dinner.
There's another story.
Is there?
Can I tell you that
Yes,
one?
please.
Okay.
Okay.
Don't repeat this, okay?
Okay.
It's confidential. Anna, Duchess of Bedford, had a husband who was a bit of a philanderer. So in the afternoons, when the court wasn't in session, she wanted all the ladies of the court to be in one place to make sure that her husband wasn't misbehaving with them. So
There you
she
go.
started the tradition of afternoon tea. It's a nice story. I don't know if it's true, but I like it.
I
Sorry
like
to
it.
interrupt you.
No,
Tell
that's
me more.
actually perfect. So then think about it. We're talking in between lunch and dinner. We're talking about a modern world where people are thinking about their diet, but they're not just thinking about their diet, they're thinking about food being medicine. And in that way, you have to think about that with your afternoon tea. Make it light, but also, and make it varied. We did one just recently where we actually did it as a plated afternoon tea, and that was brilliant because people weren't overwhelmed with everything, and we controlled the order in which they ate it. So you start with something light, and then you move on, and of course you have to finish with dessert. But one of the things we did just recently, we served a little tart as a dessert, and I did it also a few days ago. I did a cucumber gin and tonic cake. So the cake was actually infused with cucumber. It made it much lighter and fresher. And then we did a gin buttercream with a piece of cucumber and mint on it. And when you ate it, it was like having a gin and tonic with no alcohol in it at all. We used alcohol-free gin, and so there's ways to do it. But I think afternoon tea should be an occasion where everyone meets, take some time out, and have a meal that is well balanced and light, but leaves you able to have a dinner as well. Should be flavoursome, should be light, should be, I mean, sometimes you can have 3 or 4 teas, and you should, I think, but sometimes you have to be careful that there is too much tea. So it's a balance of what you're going to give them. You can give them a white tea champagne. That's a great way to start if you want to do it with no alcohol, and that can be paired with just a little bite of something that refreshes and starts the day. Or you go traditional, and I've seen some amazing things now. Some of the people have created little boxes, and you open that box and you have different drawers. So there's many ways to create that afternoon tea vibe, make it classy, make it really beautiful, and also make sure that, as you said, it's not about filling yourself with as much as possible. It's not about sugar, sugar, sugar. The scone is good. The cucumber sandwich, in my eyes, is dead, but people still do it. The reason, say, the cucumber sandwich, there's butter on it. So I feel that when you have all this butter, it's going to coat your tongue as well, and you won't be able to taste the tea. Having said that, the tea will help to emulsify and also cleanse your palate. But a scone, let's start thinking a little bit sideways on that. People expect it, don't they? But I did recently a cheese biscuit, which was basically a scone. But what we did was we made a gravy, which was like an onion gravy, infused with a really strong tea. So you got that, you know, when you picked it up, it was more afternoon tea than a dessert, but it went on the dessert section. We also did this tart case, a little light tart, and it had the vegetables of the garden from where we were. So you're thinking sweet and garden vegetables, it's actually pretty cool. It's tasty, it's refreshing, and it's different. I think people want something different these days, Dilhan, and I think that afternoon tea space is a great place to put it. It's a nice way also, as you said, come together, have a few hours together. You know, afternoon tea normally falls around 2:33. Pick the kids up, drop them off somewhere, come in, relax, because you're going to go home and have to deal with everything else. So it's a wind down, it's a mid-afternoon relax session, and you're obviously consuming tea, which is going to be good for you as well.
I was in Japan a few weeks ago, and their afternoon teas in some properties have become so popular that they're starting at 11.
Wow.
So they go from 11 until 5. But you're absolutely right. Afternoon tea has a certain size. It's bite size. There was an interesting perspective that we heard from Suresh in Nuareli a few days ago, and his opinion was that afternoon tea was for people who didn't have the time to engage in a formal occasion over lunch, and who filled in that necessity to have milestone, have that elegance in dining and so on, using an afternoon tea. Yeah, so elegance, and to which tea lends itself beautifully.
And I think elegance is a good word, because we're not at the pub having a schnitzel, we're enjoying an incredibly handcrafted beverage with something that is, you know, made with love and passion. And really, everyone that does afternoon tea wants to make a statement. Because once you do, they're going to keep coming back.
Peter, you talked about tea as an ingredient, as a beverage, as an ingredient. But I think what moves us so much, what moved my father to when you say, he always used to tell us, I devoted my life to tea. That's a pretty strong statement, but it is to the story behind this, because each cup or glass of tea embodies not only great taste, not only natural plant-based antioxidant goodness, but also a purpose. A purpose that is expressed in the lives of people and in nature. How does this work as part of what you constantly tell us, that chefs want stories and want authenticity?
I think you can make peace with food and tea. I mean, if you think about the delegates that came to our last conference, they were from all over the world. Some parts of the world where people didn't get on, but you know what? They were brought together by this. They were brought together by the want to create incredible experiences. And so I think this will continue. What your father has started and what you're continuing is I think it's a pure perfection. It's not blended. And the story, the Dilmah story is incredible. The way he decided that he wanted to bring all the money back to Sri Lanka. I'm involved. I was actually today talking to the director of one of the culinary schools where Dilmah has just changed people's lives forever. And it just made me think that, it's not just this cup of tea, but it's everything else that happens behind the scenes when you drink this beautiful tea. So the story continues. His passion and his desire to bring Ceylon tea to the people while bringing the money back to Sri Lanka is well and truly alive. And all of us are just little characters in this incredible story that love the product and love, to give me artistic creativity and freedom to be able to continue to create and invent. Hopefully I'll be part of that story as well.
Brilliant. So Peter, I think there's only one thing left to do, which is to echo my father's words. So you need to choose a tea.
I'm going the strongest.
Yatamata.
Yeah, the
Intense.
Yes.
Humid, beautiful structure, bold, fruity. I'm going to go actually with the beautiful Udavatta from Somerset Estate in the magnificent Dilmah Valley. So with that, I think, do try it, do you think?
Do try it.
Yeah. Cheers,
try it,
Peter.
guys.
Thank you. Do try it.